Welcome to an episode of Non-Duality. This channel will explore non-duality in a simple, direct, and effective manner, and is how it applies to our everyday life. So in this episode, we're going to look into the 8 U.S. debt crises and provide depth on each of the crises. The United States is in a debt storm like never before, with crises affecting every corner of the economy. Today, we'll uncover the 8 biggest debt crises, what they mean, and why they're shaping our future. Let's dive in. So the first one is the federal debt ceiling crisis. First, the federal debt ceiling, or ticking time bomb. On January 1st, 2025, the debt ceiling is reinstated at over $36 trillion. And Congress has to act fast. If they don't raise or suspend the limit, the government risks defaulting on its obligations. A default means delayed Social Security checks, unpaid military salaries, and massive disruptions in government programs. The last time this happened in 2011, the U.S. credit rating was downgraded, costing taxpayers billions in higher borrowing costs. Stakes are higher now, and the clock is ticking. Second is the national debt crisis. At over $36 trillion, the U.S. national debt is in an all-time high and growing. The debt comes from years of deficit spending, pandemic relief, defense budgets, and rising costs of entitlement programs like Social Security and Medicare. And here's the problem. The government spends more on interest payments every year, projected to hit $1 trillion annually by 2033. That's money that could go to education, healthcare, or infrastructure. If we don't address this, future generations will shoulder the burden. Third, the consumer debt crisis. Americans owe a staggering $17 trillion in consumer debt. Over $1 trillion of that is in credit cards, with average interest rates between 20 to 25%. Think about it. If you carry a $10,000 balance, you're paying $2,500 a year just in interest. Auto loans are also at record highs, and delinquencies are creeping up, especially for borrowers with subprime credit. For millions, it feels like the cost of living has outpaced their incomes, pushing families deeper into debt. The question is, how do we stop the cycle? 4. State and local debt. State and local governments are in trouble too. Public pensions, the retirement funds for teachers, firefighters, and police officers, are underfunded by $1.4 trillion. In Illinois, for example, pensions are funded at just 43%, which puts future retirees at risk, and at work. And it's not just pensions. States are drowning in infrastructure debt. Roads, bridges, and water systems need $2.6 trillion in repairs, but the funding just isn't there. Without major investments, these problems will only get worse. 5. Corporate debt crisis. Corporate America isn't immune. Business is now over $12.5 trillion in debt. Many took advantage of low interest rates during the pandemic, but now those lows are coming due, and refinancing is expensive. This is especially true in commercial real estate. Office spaces are sitting empty because of remote work trends, and companies are struggling to pay back loans on these properties. The result? A wave of potential defaults that could send shockwaves through the economy. Number 6, student loan debt crisis. Student loan debt in the U.S. has surpassed $1.7 trillion. After a multi-year pause, payments resumed in late 2024, and borrowers are feeling the squeeze. Even with income-driven repayment plans, many borrowers are struggling to make ends meet. A wave of defaults could hit in 2025, especially as inflation continues to bite into household budgets. This isn't just about students, it's about families, communities, and the broader economy. 7. Housing debt and affordability. The housing market is in crisis. Mortgage debt now stands at over $12 trillion, with interest rates above 7%. The average monthly payment for a new home buyer is unaffordable for most Americans. At the same time, rents are skyrocketing. Over 30% of renters are considered rent burdened, meaning they spend more than a third of their income on rent. Evictions are also on the rise as pandemic protections expire. The affordability crisis is deepening the gap between homeowners and renters, making housing a luxury rather than a basic need. Number 8. Geopolitical and global debt pressures. Finally, we can't forget about the global picture. Countries like China and Japan hold trillions in US debt, but geopolitical tensions are shifting their priorities. China, for example, has been reducing its holdings of US Treasury bonds and diversifying its reserves. At the same time, global debt has reached $307 trillion. Many emerging economies like Turkey and Argentina are struggling to repay their debts, and a collapse in one of these economies could ripple into the US financial system. Add to that efforts to move away from the US dollar as the world's reserve currency, and the pressure on America's financial dominance is real. So, from debt ceiling to global financial risks, the challenges we're facing are massive. But understanding these issues is the first step toward finding solutions. If you found this breakdown helpful, hit like, subscribe, and join the conversation in the comments. Let's work through these crises together. And so, in this episode, we outline simply what the debt crisis is, not only within the US but globally. Next episode, we'll look at what could simply be fundamentally different in terms of approach and solutions. And then lastly, we'll look into why is it that the human being within the US and globally will have great difficulty coming upon a fundamentally different way of solving for these problems.